Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and today I'm joined by my other amazing host.
Hi, it's me, May, also known as Magic.
And we've got a fun little episode that we're going to do for you today because I think both May and I are truly excited about Bloomburrow, the return to form for what I love about magic and fantasy tropes in general. May?
I adore everything about this set ever since that it was first spoiled. I have been wanting a set without humans for so long. And now I get a set full of cute, fluffy critters.
I made a statement to our play group. This will probably be the first time, and I'm going to let prices kind of settle down as we do, right? But I'm actually excited about purchasing a box and just drafting this. That's something that I'm normally like, I purchase singleton type situation or singles. But in this circumstance, I just think this is such a neat return to form for Magic. And I'm kind of quoting a little bit of our good friend Pleasant Kenobi here because he also stated that he just loves like the tropes and the anamorphic idea behind what they've done here. He noted it as like Wind in the Willows, and I see it more of Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim or The Secret of Nim, which is one of my favorite childhood movies whenever I was 1982.
I love Secrets of Nim.
Oh my goodness. That's what this just screams to me, and I think they just did an amazing homage.
It's because it has a sort of Redwall vibe. Sorry to interrupt.
What is Redwall? I actually saw that post up a couple of times too, and I want to research that a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
So it's a book series, and I don't know anything about it but aside from that, but supposedly it's really good.
It's just amazing. Like, the minute I started seeing these spoilers, it just was like you said, a flashback to my childhood and everything I loved about all the fantasy tropes. Now, from a cube perspective, I'm not sure what I'm 100% supposed to do with this set. I know I want to draft it. And when I take my current cube set list, which is 8 of them, I am actually trying to find cards that can fit in. But something like this just screams to me like I want to build a cube based on this entire set, right? Have you got those feels?
Oh, same.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to put that down.
It is hard for me not to feel that way when we have a lot of that art style kind of returning from that, I almost want to say Lorwyn period, where it's very drastic colors, storybook feeling that we don't get in a lot of sets. It's extremely unique.
And I would say, yeah, you 100% hit it on the nail on the head or the hammer to the nail, as we mentioned before, because I feel like the art styles in this are just so vibrant that it doesn't look cutesy. It looks like literally a lot of these characters are prepping for war or their lives are at stake. Or in this case, like Secret of Nim, where the field is on fire and they have to mobilize type situation. That's what I love about it. So it's just a real callback for me in my personal childhood and how I think some of that's formative in the idea of how I actually found Magic, right? So I am more excited about this set than I have been for a long time. So yeah, I think we agree upon that. Before we travel any further down this conversation, I'd like to do the thing that we always do here, May, and we'll start out with you. What are you having for this episode?
I'm actually keeping it pretty simple because it's chill Friday afternoon, so I'm just drinking some green tea with some sugar and cream.
I decided to go ahead and crack open a little bit of sweet water here. I've got the Extra Pale Ale 420. I'm going to go ahead and pop it open, and we'll get to the conversation. All right, so we've had a listener request that I kind of want to do before we deep dive into this, and it was from our good friend Daniel, who asked, hey, can you guys kind of talk about your Magic Week and what the ongoing's on? Like, the listeners would like to know, what is your engagement? What is your involvement with Magic? And just last night, May, I got to play our good friend Nathan's cube, who is listed as Gruel something or another in our Discord, so I have no idea who I'm talking to when I'm talking to this individual, but he built a Ghostbusters thematic cube. And
That's
it is
wonderful.
his first. Oh, yeah. He is 100%, and his child are like Ghostbuster fanatics, right? And it was so cool to me to see Nathan take a thematic top-level design. It's his first foray into this idea, right? And then take cards and then try to translate them into the cube genre. So cards which I'll have to dig them up and find them, but something like Scream Puff, which I don't have that card in front of me, but he's looking for Stay Puff Marshmallow Man. That's the type of work that Nathan put into this.
Sure.
right? And we're gonna.
I'm here for it.
Oh yeah, Keymaster, the whole works, right? I mean, spirits. It's literally. He's even got like mass hysteria in this cube because dogs and cats. Mass hysteria. It's just all the tropes. We played it last night. He played Ray Parker on the background. He played the Ghostbusters themes. He kind of did the thing we were joking just this last night. He did the same thing that I did when I first launched the film for the very first time. I put together a playlist of my favorite women in music, and I think I did Gwen Stefani, and I'm even going to say a little bit of Taylor Swift. I was just trying to set a vibe, and I love that when he brought this cube, he even brought, I'm not sure what you call it, I am not a Ghostbusters fanatic, but he brought the little instrument that detects if they're ghosts or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he brought it hard. It was so amazing. But yeah, to sit around, even if the cube needs to be balanced, and we kind of talked about that, and it's a work in progress. But for me, when you're cracking packs and you have someone that has a vision, May, and you know what they're trying to say to you, it is so awesome. It's kind of that reader-writer relationship that we've joked about before. Nathan wants to tell us about Ghostbusters, but through the story of magic. It's such a cool idea. Yeah, so it was exciting. I wanted to share that with the audience. You have anything that you, in the last couple of weeks, that you've got a chance to try out a little bit of Magic? Little cube?
So I haven't actually gotten to play a lot of Magic. The last time that I had people over, a lot of people were playing Magic and whatever, but I was actually just spending a lot of time with somebody who doesn't really play Magic. She's interested, but she's just kind of cautiously dipping her toes in just because she sees how engaged her husband is. So...
Yeah, did you get to do, hey, listen to my mixtape type thing you talked about in the last episode where you're running across the street? Hey, have you heard of Cube?
So, funnily enough, I didn't initiate that. She did. Because I was mentioning the fact that sometimes that I record for this and whatnot. And then she's like, oh, you do podcasts? And I was like, yeah, it's about magic stuff and whatever. And she's like, well, I need a thing to listen to during work. And it's not that I don't have any idea about magic. So, if you happen to listen to this one, appreciate you.
Yeah, and also when we played last night, another cool thing, we've got a new friend of our group, a listener that's joined our party here, and he actually lives in the Raleigh-Durham area as well. Justin, his little brother, Nate, and we have two Nates now. We have Nathan Prime and Nathan, I guess, whatever, Subprime, I don't know. But whenever they came in, the new Nate got to come in and play Cube for the very first time. So it's always cool whenever someone cracks packs for their inaugural Cube. And on top of that, they got to see for the first time the Ghostbusters Cube, which I thought was so cool because you guessed it, May. He's like, I'm familiar with MTGO, which was our conversation from our last episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a neat foundation to see that people are open to the world of Cube. But I think that's not what we're here to talk about. I just wanted to give a little recap of our Cube week, kind of talk about what we've been doing, and just kind of as an exercise by request, right? But we're here to talk about Bloomburrow. May, you said this set excites you. What excites you about Bloomburrow?
It's a bunch of little furry creatures. What's not to love? There's also a couple other reasons that I really like it. Like seeing a dedicated typal set and the way that they kind of overlapped it. And it kind of gives me a good framework for comparison, I guess. Yeah,
so the playfulness of the set, but also the artistic, just the tropes that went into this set. It's so gorgeous. It's so beautifully rendered. Again, it was a callback to my childhood and everything about this. I don't think I've been this excited about a set since something like, say, Innistrad for me personally, where like I just want to learn more about this lore. I want to know more that this set has to offer. And again, it's kind of not to poo-poo on another set, but it's not a bunch of animals wearing hats, right? Would you agree with that?
Exactly.
Like it's that's
it is not just character you already know plus cowboy hat. It is a lot of new characters with their own story. This entirely new environment where it really feels like that they took a concept and ran with it, and I'm here for it. I'm all for, I'm going to call them beach episode sets. I think that they're fun. I think that it can be just a funny concept to take a character that we know and put them in a funny hat this week and then say, there you go, there's the set. But when it comes to the kind of beautiful design behind Bloomburrow, what makes it work in a way that I actually care about is that it gives me characters to sink my teeth into in a literary standpoint, right? It gives me something to look for in the cards.
Yeah, it's got me asking questions like not just mechanically based or is this card's power level good enough? And I'm willing to evaluate that, and we will talk about some of that. But it's also got to do with I'm willing to make a certain amount of sacrifices on power level because of the aesthetics that this set provides, right? It's not like we kind of joked, it's not Oko with a cowboy hat, right? It's a different creature. And I'm looking at it from all these, I'm taking my 8 cubes, and then I'm going to ask you some of these as we move through them. I'm asking myself not just power level evaluation, but like, how do you feel? Because I think this set actually taps in that idea. I've got some responses from other listeners that kind of said this is not their jam, and because they don't like the cutesiness of it. And I appreciate that. I understand that if you're looking for raw power level, this set has a lot of bangers in it, but it also kind of maybe aesthetically it'll differentiate itself from what your cube is trying to do. And that's okay, because I'm looking at it, is this card metal? Is this going to fit in the Fem cube, and would that be accepted? Is this going to a Power Max cube? How would this play in a two-headed giant environment scenario? Or the Monopoly, right? Or is this artifact-centric? It's so neat because not only that, I get these artistic, like we said, the anamorphic, that's another hard word, these type of ideas. Yeah, we're going to get that one right too. We'll get skewered on the internet. But the idea is that I'm looking for something that not only fits like the power level and what I want this card to do, but what I like about the art is driving my choices more than normal. I'm willing to make the sacrifice. Without further ado, let's kind of get into it. What were the core mechanics of this set that are so appealing to you, May?
So, in terms of core mechanics in regards to, say, the Fey Cube, there's not going to be a lot. But in terms of the actual set mechanics that were introduced in the greater span of my other cube designs or my other decks and whatnot, there's a lot going on that I really love. Like, I want to start off with Offspring as a mechanic, because I just find Offspring just a really good way to add modality to a creature in a way that feels fun.
I would agree with that 100%. The only thing that we're going to have that's going to be kind of tilted a little bit negative, and it's not that it is, I've had kind of this renaissance of cutting double-faced modal cards and also trying to, I guess, glean back the idea of using too many tokens in my cubes. And this idea introduces more tokens. And I acknowledge that the tokens are oftentimes very powerful. To get 2 of these effects is
and they're
not
very
something
cute. Have you seen the tokens for them?
They are, the tokens are outstanding. It's a matter of, I guess it goes into the logistics of hosting a cube event. Just last night, like when we played the film, even though I have things alphabetized, there was a good solid 10 minutes where I'm stopping in the middle of a game and I'm in the game, right? To tell people, oh, the tokens are over there. They're alphabetized. You could sort through them. And then eventually people pick up on that. Or where's the binder at for the Ghostbusters cube? That happened last night too. So we do a little bit of, it's okay interruptions, but we are breaking someone's thoughts. And if you're a lot like me, I'm in the middle of trying to solve a problem. I'm getting my butt kicked. I got killed by a Emrakul last night by our good friend Sam, and I'm trying to solve this riddle, which I never actually solved. But in the middle of that, I get asked, hey, I need such and such token, a token with prowess. Do you have any zombies that do this special thing? Or I need the 3/3 that comes from this particular one that's an unusual zombie. So
I will say that this is where infinity tokens can be an absolute blessing in situations like these. So we can kind of, not sponsored. It's just something I use a lot specifically for this reason of just, here's anything that you need that is specialized, there you go. However,
I've started shifting that way too myself, because it is a disruption a little bit.
It is. But I will say that when it comes to like the Fey Cube, Offspring's just not going to be a mechanic that I'm going to be putting in the Fey Cube. So for context, since we kind of went over it, Offspring is essentially a kicker effect where you pay an additional cost when you play the spell. And when you do, you can create a token that's a copy of the creature, except it's a 1/1. So this mechanic's really cool because you can actually like double up on different abilities. Like Paw Patch Recruit is one of the big ones that I was looking at as in terms of like being a powerful card. It is 1 green for a 2/1 with trample. Even if it was just a 2/1 with trample for 1, it already would have been like fine. Then it has offspring. Then it has whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, then you put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control other than that creature. And doubling that up, paying 3 mana to get 2 of those is just really good. And I love that modality. 100%. You can play it as a 1-drop, you can play it as a 3-drop, and you're going to feel good no matter which ones you play it as.
Going back to the Infinity tokens, yeah, that brings a good point too. The tokens are absolutely stunning. I was looking at those today and making jokes about that, like, oh my god, I have to buy these. I don't know if I'm going to use them, but I'm definitely going to buy them. And some of them, the effects, and as we progress through this episode, they are so good. Another effect that I really like out of the set is Gift a Card. And the reason why I like that effect, some of them are very good 1v1, and I didn't necessarily add those to this episode, but a lot of them are going to be very like multiplayer centric type of cubes. I mean, they are pseudo commander type of effects, if you will. But like in my 2-headed giant, when I see Gift a Card, that inspires me to do some shenanigans where my effect, I get something if I give you something. But as I'm evaluating those, 2-headed giant, using that one as the benchmark, I'm going to say, like, I'm okay with giving a person a card, but I don't want to give them a fish because now I have to get a fish token, right? Which is, again, we could solve that, but I am kind of looking at the cards from that day. But Gift a Card is like you give them something, but you get a greater effect. So here's an example of the gift it's a cool card. It's Consumed My Greed. And it's for 1 colorless and black. You get an instant. Gift a card. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast a spell. If you do, they draw a card before its other effects, which is kind of neat and it allows like a point of interaction. So I'm really a fan of that. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. If a gift was promised, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. This got squirrels all over it, so you can only imagine that is pulling both myself into the 2-headed giant cube, where I run like this definite squirrel theme that we'll talk about soon, and our good friend Anthony Maddox. I'm curious to see like what the impact of the squirrel art is doing to you emotionally, because it is pulling me in 100%. But I think it's so neat, these type of cards, where it's kind of creates... It forces interaction to a degree. It gives the opponent an opportunity to repeal or act based on what you're doing. I think it's really cool. What I don't really necessarily at this moment in time want to dive in is to giving them an alternate token. Here's your fish, here's your octopus, right? I think that's where I'm at right now. What do you think about that, May?
So I think that Gift a Card is a particularly cool mechanic as well, because it really gives an additional faucet to your card, if you will. And like you said, adding that additional avenue for interaction, and there are a lot of players that don't want to give their opponents anything. And there can be times when you have kind of the control of when you give it to them, so that way when you do, it doesn't matter. And I think that there is a lot of avenues to show skillful play with this as a mechanic, but it's also just like a relatively simple mechanic. Like, even though that there's a lot of like complex interactions that we can have and points that people can do before it resolves and whatnot, at the end of the day, it's, I'm giving you a fish so I can do thing, or I'm giving you a card so I can do thing. And I really like the simplicity of that as a mechanic.
I agree with that. May and I were kind of talking pre-gaming before this episode, and I kind of compared it to, you know, the popular game of the time right now is pickleball, where there's volleying happening. So I find myself as a Magic player okay with having to solve riddles, because I've presented May with an unknown answer. Like, she may have drawn the card that's going to basically deal with what I just did. But I think from my Johnny type of brain, I want to try to solve that, and it adds another layer of sophistication. So I'm pro the idea of it, and I probably will come around to the idea of gifting them a fish or an octopus, etc., or a food. But for this moment in time, I'm kind of okay with giving them, you may draw a card, May, in response to me doing this before it enters. You know what I mean? So I think that's such a cool idea. Let's kind of deep dive into the various cards that I'm going to add, or I'm looking at through the lens of certain cubes. So I'm going to kind of go with my Uber Bears Powered Vintage Cube. It's a 540. So I'm looking at a power maxed environment. But what's interesting about these cards is I kind of dive into them. Yes, I'm going to put them in a powered maxed environment, but I do not think they're necessarily power maxed and that they have homes all over the place. The first one I have is Kitsa, the Otterball Elite. For 1 colorless and 1 blue, you get a legendary creature, Otter Wizard. Vigilance and Prowess. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. Or you can pay 2, tap it, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if Kitz's power is 3 or greater. This card asks you to play Magic. It asks you to be Spells Matters. It's funny, May, how far looter effects have come. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Like, the fact that it's looter plus plus plus, and it's just like, oh my word, how many different degrees are we going to just start adding onto these looters? But at the end of the day, it is a really cute card. I will add really that what I do like about it is that even though it does have so many things going on with it, Vigilance, Prowess, Looting on its own for being a 2-drop is already really good. Adding that 2-mana ability to turn it sideways to copy something only really happens if you've already pumped its power to 3 or greater. If you've already played a bunch of other spells, if you've already done these other things, the juice is worth the squeeze in this case. And by the time that you get to that payoff, it's going to feel really good. But even if you don't, this is just a generally playable card.
Oh, yeah. The fact that a looter has vigilance is kind of next level all by itself, right? I mean, that's what pushes this card for me. And I think it's just such a dynamic card. It's easy to read. I appreciate that. It has a lot of words on it, but I think it's so cleanly organized
that's one thing that I adore about Bloomburrow. Sorry to cut you off, but...
Oh, you're good.
I absolutely adore how clean a lot of these card designs are in this set.
It's easy to parse for me
yes.
as I'm going through, because I'm already doing some complicated stuff, and I may have just given you a gift and all the things, but I can parse this card out. I kind of, other than the fact that the card I'm looking at right now says Vigilance and Prowess, which are evergreen effects. If I were a new player, I could explain those, but they're so simplistic, I think, to explain. After we get past that, this card kind of just reads itself to you. It has a lot of complexity, could do a lot of stuff. It is an engine, but also at the same time, it's so clean for me to understand it as an in-franchise Magic player. This next one I have, I like this one too. I'm probably going to have to get the art because Offspring is a new idea. I like to get the full arts. I like to get the foils. Hi, my name's Anthony. I like to overinvest in these ideas. But Offspring is new. It's not evergreen. It will stop the play when people have to ask what this card does. But it's Dark Star Augur. For 2 colorless and 1 black, you get a creature, Bat, Warlock. Offspring, 1 black. Flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value for a 2/3 flyer. So this is Dark Confidant for 1 more mana that now can make a copy of itself, right? It's like a 1/1. Is that how Offspring works? Could you refresh me on Offspring, please?
So you would pay the 1, and then you make a 1/1 that's an exact copy of it.
Yeah, so now you can see where like Suicide Black is what people used to refer to this as, and it has evasion. This card is insane. I'm willing to pay that cost to, on hypothetically slow mana, turn 4, start drawing 2 cards. Oh, this card's beautiful. And I think it's amazing, and it will go into power maxed environments, but at the same time, I think it's amazing and doesn't have to just go in power maxed environments.
I think that in terms of like black card design, this might be the best in terms of Muldrifter-esque cards.
Yeah,
you're paying
agree.
3. You're playing that rate of 3 for a Muldrifter. You're always getting at least a card, but you can pay 4 to grab 2 cards and have a token. Like, that's really good rate. And the fact that they have Invasion is just all impactful.
Oh, I agree 100%. Like, this card actually can attack in, where Bob does struggle with this. Like, we're talking about Dark Confidant. It doesn't necessarily go into combat very well. This card is designed for combat and continues to give you card advantage, which is amazing. But at a cost, right? You don't know what you're going to have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's a lean and mean card. I love everything about it. I can see this fitting in all kinds of environments. I am going to test this in my Powered Vintage Cube, but I may also put this in other environments too. And it's metal as heck. I haven't decided on that, but I do like the idea that maybe Bats are a little metal. It might go in the Munson. So it gets kind of my brain churning from a curation standpoint and the art direction of the card and everything about it. The next one I have, and this one I've seen it on a lot of lists. I'm going to reference Steve Mann and the MTG Salvation website. If you don't look at that, you should. If you're looking for power max type environments or high powered type of environments, they leave up lists, and I can include that in the show notes as well, is Jacked Rabbit. For X and 1 colorless and 1 white, you get a creature rabbit warrior, and it has Ravenous. This creature enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. If X is 5 or more, draw a card when it enters. When Jacked Rabbit attacks, create a 1/1 white rabbit creature, tokens equal to Jack Rabbit's power for a 1/2 for, we're going to play 1 colorless, 1 white, and X. I love this because early game, mid game, late game. My only detractor idea behind this is that I just don't want to add, at this time, white rabbit tokens, and I know we have solutions for that. That's the only reason why I'm kind of a little on the fence with this, but I do recognize this card is very powerful. What do you think about this card, May?
It's a lot of tokens.
That's where I rest at. Yeah.
At its floor, paying it for 2, getting a 1/2 and a 1/1, that's so good for just bread and butter. I get 2 tokens for things like aristocrats. I can have just things that I can boost to attack with. But throwing away a bunch of mana, getting a big board out of nowhere, and potentially drawing a card is huge. Plus, I just love the concept of Jacked Rabbit. It's a buff rabbit.
Oh, it is. It's fantastic. The art's wonderful. So I had this back porch magic over at Stu's house conversation recently, and we were playing my powered vintage cube. And our good friend Sam, one of our Patreons that we talk about at the end, Sam McKenna, mentioned to me that my red aggro didn't really meet his expectations of where red aggro should be. I was really leaning towards by the time you get to 3, maybe sometimes 2, you can actually put pressure on your opponent. And he is a strong advocate for really pressuring the control players and the mid-range players to start striking them with those 2/1s for 1 type of idea, right? Even at the cost of maybe the card's not amazing. Well, what this set has given me is 2 cards that I think, Sam, if you're listening, that can solve my problem for what you're asking for. And the first one is Hired Claw. For 1 red, you get a creature, Lizard Mercenary, which is strange. When you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. I can then pay 1 colorless and 1 red, put a 1/1 counter on Hired Claw, activate only if an opponent lost life this turn, and only once each turn. This card can actually get bigger. It starts out as a little kind of zoomy card, right? Doesn't have haste, but it does actually start hitting them by turn 2, if you dropped it on turn 1, obviously. But what's interesting is it kind of mimics the idea of I pay 1 red and I get a 2/1, but then it has all these other flavorful ideas behind it. I think this card is fantastic. What do you think, May?
So, there are some things that I do like about Hired Claw, and there are things that I don't. So, I will start off with the things that I do like about it. What I do like about it is that even though that, yes, it mentions lizards on the card, it's not relevant for some weird type of thing for just generic cubes. But what it does mean is that you guarantee get the 1 damage off when it attacks. So hypothetically, if you can get through, there are no blockers, you effectively have a 2/2. Great. Then you have your mana dump into, hey, it's now turn 2. I can now pump it to potentially make it 3 damage. I have nothing better to do, so why not? Force my opponent to deal with it. The thing that I don't like about it is that there are a lot of points in which your opponent can either just wall it. There's a lot of potential for it to just not be relevant just because it doesn't have haste. The biggest problem is that without another lizard on the board, you are not getting that initial value when it enters. And let's say you tried to play it as, let's say, a 3-drop, right? So you're paying 1 to play the creature and then 1 to pump it the turn that it comes in because your opponent lost life this turn, right? What does that actually end up with? You end up paying 3 for a 2/3 that hasn't done anything else. right? So while I do like it on its floor level, I think that its ceiling is lackluster. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, it's definitely got like a burnout phase. I would agree with that. I'm going to test it. I think it really kind of motivates that red aggro that I need because, like I said, I'm starting at benchmark 2. Really, the action is happening at 3, which kind of rolls into turn 4 theoretically. And I want to kind of make the red aggro kind of push again. So I can see a home for this for a little while. I'm going to test it, see what it thinks. But this next card, I'm also very excited about because it kind of has some of the things we talked about. It's Emberheart Challenger for 1 colorless and 1 red. You get a creature, Mouse Warrior. The art is sick. It has a sword. And for whatever reason, it also has like a mage's staff in the art, which is amazing and beautifully rendered. But it has haste, prowess, valiant. Whenever Emberheart Challenger becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of turn, you may play that card for a 2/2. So you get a 2/2 haste for 2 with prowess, and it allows you to start doing some card advantage via the Valiant effect. If it becomes, so it kind of screams like you want to interact with this card. You want to put some 0 mana equipment or a Bone Splinter on this equipment and really start kind of doing that. So I think it's really cool.
I really like Emberheart Challenger. Like, if it just stopped at Haste Prowess, then I would have liked it for a lot of environments, but the fact that it had that Valiant just tacked onto it, if you can find a way to take advantage of it, to just maybe get an additional card that can take advantage of, there are a lot of avenues where this can be very powerful. And just having Haste Prowess, True Drop, True 2 is exactly what we're looking for when I'm trying to build this kind of aggro package. It's kind of similar to like a 2-drop version of like Monastery Swift Sphere in a way.
Right. That's exactly how I see it. It's just kind of really complements that idea. So it intertwines with what I'm looking for from both the red aggro standpoint, but also kind of pushes into that spells matters type prowess effects, right? So it's a little bit of the best of both worlds is what I'm kind of getting out of this, right? And I'm a fan of this card. I'm willing to try this. I personally like this a little bit more than the Hired Claw, but for the 1 mana, I'm willing to make that sacrifice for a little less, I guess, modality. Kind of checks what I need. I need more pressure up front in that particular environment. So if you're looking for pressure points, I think these 2 cards kind of get it done, even though, like we said, one of them kind of peters out, if you will, right? But I think the Emberheart Challenger will kind of press for the game for the remainder. So the next one I have on this list that I'm looking at for my 540 powered vintage cube, this is an interesting conversation that's come up, is Keen-Eyed Curator. For green, you get a creature, Raccoon Scout. I have to stop myself from just falling in love out the gate with this amazing art with the raccoon. But as long as there are, it is so cute. But as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards exiled with Keen-Eyed Curator, it gets +4/+4 and has trample. Then you can pay 1 colorless, exile target card from a graveyard for a 3/3 base. We're going to compare this to Scavenging Ooze, although it doesn't have the life-gaining mechanism that Scavenging Ooze does. And they're both cute. I'm not anti-Scoos. But if you're running like the Tarmogoyf packages that have recently come out or the Madness packages and you're really following into that idea of discard matters and filling your graveyard, I can see where Keen-Eyed Curator just really comes online and can represent like a 7/7 threat with trample pretty rapidly. What do you think about this card, May?
So one of the things that I like about it is that unlike Scoos, it's colorless. Like for the activated ability, obviously. So even though you're having to pay the 2 green pips for the initial thing, you have a much stronger floor. But I do think that that has an innate downside compared to Scoos, because Scoos has this kind of built-in scaling from the get-go, versus Keen-Eyed Curator has to get precisely to 4 or more, versus Scoos, it doesn't matter whether or not you just get 1, 2, whatever, it's going to keep getting those +1/+1 counters, and that 1 life that you get from Scoos is very relevant when it comes to dealing with aggressive decks, because if you're staving off just extra damage, then that's just a way that you can stave off a little bit of that extra damage. But Keen-Eyed Curator is also just a better blocker, so I think it's a cool card. I like it a lot. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, I'm not offended if you ran both of these, to be honest with you. If you have the space for it, I'm going to struggle
Yeah,
to
Space
try to
Scroll.
make it.
Pork Analyst.
Yeah, I have a decision point that I have to make here. I like them both. I don't want to cause Reanimator, even though Reanimator is inherently broken in a powered vintage cube. This is a known quantity. I also don't want to put so many breakpoints in it to make the deck irrelevant either. So when you're kind of choosing as a curator, you kind of have to decide, what's the payoff to the cost, right? These are both powerful things. Like May said it, Scavenging Ooze is really good at disabling Reanimator, but simultaneously, it's also great for stabilizing and shutting down aggro packages. Keen-Eyed Curator, when I look at this card, it really is kind of one-sided in its dimensions. It's there to shut down Reanimator, and it has its own form of green aggro, making a 7/7, even though it doesn't have any form of evasion, if you will. It's hard. I'm curious to see. I'm going to watch a lot of videos and content on this, but I'm curious to see how this card performs. Right now, I think I'm team Scavenging Ooze because it's more multifaceted against multiple decks, and I don't want to add too many breakpoints as a curator, to break the most broken subset of Magic that I run in that cube. But simultaneously, it's just I'm not sure how to balance these scales yet. I'm curious what the
one thing that I do like
one.
About Keen-Eyed Curator is just the fact that it doesn't care what card type you get rid of. It's not dependent on your opponent in that way.
I agree with that 100%. Versus the Skews is really looking for a creature to get that benefit, right?
Right.
But at the same time, the Skews allows you to interact as the opponent goes to get like a solid playable that they require to make their engine work. So I guess these are pseudo interchangeable in my mind, right? Whatever makes you happy. I would lean towards the Keen-Eyed Curator's a little cuter, and that's really going to pull me in. And the art is fantastic, but they're a little bit apples and apples for different reasons.
It's a cute little raccoon. It has my heart.
Yeah, little trash panda doing the thing. So let's kind of step away from Powered Vintage Cube for a minute because we don't just focus on that here at UberCube. Let's transition over to the Fey Cube. I am dying to know from this set, May, what you think is going to... Because I actually put in the show notes cards that I thought would work, and I remember when this set was coming out, I felt like this was another May set, and I was like, oh my gosh, do you see this card? Do you see? But I also have to add in the fact that I need to evaluate not only power level, castability, but also the economics behind what the Fey Cube actually has in there. Was it $2 cap? Is that right?
Yeah, it's around two. I think it was around $3-4 cap was around where I was sitting.
Right. So you have a lot of evaluation points because you want people to be able to replicate your cube and make copies. So as I'm looking at these cards right now, we're looking at pre-sale prices. So I'm not sure where we sit with some of these. So whenever I'm pitching these ideas out, but I am dying to know, what are you thinking about for the Fey Cube? You got a couple of cards?
I do. I actually have a nice little selection of cards here, and I'm actually going to start off pretty simple with the white section, where I'm thinking of just Seasoned Warren Guard. It's a 1-drop 1/2, and whenever it attacks and you control a token, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So one of the biggest issues with the Fey Cube is that I'm wanting to improve kind of the value of that 1-drop slot without taking away, let's say, the speed, because not introducing a super fast environment to the point where you get punished by some immediate 1-drop threat is important for the Fey Cube to thrive, because people need to feel like that they get their engine online. The fact that there were so many cards that happened to be party members in this set, there was a lot of considerations, and this was just the one stick-out one in white that stuck with me, just because I already have a Token Matters theme going on. It overlaps with a lot of other strategies. It's a warrior, and the potential for it to be a 3/2 gives you a lot of payoff when you're going into that direction.
Okay, so one that I actually had that I was going to recommend to you, because I've got a list, but the more I look at it, I parse it out even more, and I'm thinking, in the realm of the Fae, one card that I think is pretty cool for you, we're going to jump over to red here a little bit, we're not going to respect the Wooburg pie colors here, is Raccoon Rallier. For 1 colorless and 1 red, creature Raccoon Bard, 2/2. I can tap it, target creature you control gains haste until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. What do you think about this card as far as pressing through your aggro packages?
So it's cute, but the problem is that the decks that would be aggressive in red don't want a Raccoon Bard.
Oh,
I know, it's cute. It's extremely cute. And I love the fact that you can just use it as a way to enable haste for your later things. And in the Fake Cube, it makes sense to have something that you can play now, so that when you play something bigger, scarier later, you can always just get your immediate value out of it. Thematically, it fits, but mechanically, it's going to not, unfortunately.
Well, this next one I have, kind of following what I believe is the Fake Cube, and having played the Fake Cube several times, I'm interested in your thoughts on this card. It's the Long Rivers Pull for 2 blue. You get an instant, and it has gift a card. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast this card. If you do, they draw a card before the other effects. Counter target creature spell. If the gift was promised instead, counter a target spell. What do you think about this card?
So, I have mixed feelings about it. I don't think that it's a bad card per se. I do think that just having blue counter target creature, perfectly fine. And in those emergency situations where it's just like, oh no, my opponent's about to play something, I don't know, Una, right? And I have to answer it now. Then it's like, yeah, sure, draw your card because you're not going to be winning the game like within the next few turns, right? But I feel like my issue is that people are going to have a lot of mixed feelings like I have about it. And the slot that it would take up is what I'm trying to consider about it. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
There's a lot of counter spells that I have, like, for reference, if y'all don't know, like, the kind of extent where the Fake Cube sits, I don't have counterspell in here. I have cancels, right? And trying to ask myself about how we're going to get 2 mana counterspell in here in a way, like, I do think that if I were to replace this with maybe Censor, it could be interesting, but I also just kind of like Censor as, like, the meta joke around it, you know?
Right.
Where it's a censored story, or it's a censored fairy tale, or whatever.
So,
but
I got an at-home question for you here.
Yeah, what's up?
Kind of pairs with this one a little bit. It's Daring Wave Rider for 4 colorless and blue. You get a creature, Otter Wizard, so it plays into your party mechanic. When Daring Wave Rider enters, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead for a 4/4. Now, I'm looking at this as a Snapcaster Mage at home with a 4/4 body for also checks the boxes of your party mechanics. What do you think about this card?
I was thinking about the Wave Rider. It was on my radar. I'm still on the fence about it just because my expensive blue cards, we'll call them, is taken up by Archive Dragon, Horned Lock Whale, and Sorcoast Serpent. And Horned Lock Whale and Sorcoast Serpent both being, like, pretty strong adventure cards on their own is hard to justify taking out when it comes to this environment. And Archive Dragon is exactly where I want it to be in terms of 6-drop power level. But I think that it is something I'm willing to experiment of adding an additional 6-drop.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think it fits your theme, kind of hits a couple,
Absolutely.
like I said, the party mechanic. And you have a few otters in there already, right? So it's not a far-reaching idea. It thematically
I have one otter in here so far. I do want to talk about that. The thing that I was really excited for this, though, was because it has such typal things, is that there actually are 3 cards that I am particularly excited for the Fake Cube that I already know what I'm going to swap for. So the first is Barkform Harvester. It's a 3-mana, 2/3 artifact creature shapeshifter. As Changeling and Reach, you can pay 2 colorless mana to put target card from your graveyard at the bottom of your library. The flavor of it's beautiful. The card art is whimsical and the kind of shapeshifting vibe that I need over some of the other artifact shapeshifter changelings that I have in here. And I think that it's really important that I had these as a swap. And I'm so happy to be able to get this type of card as a swap. And then there's the 2-mana version where it doesn't have the keyword. It's just a 2-mana 2/1, and you can pay 1 to add 1 mana of any color, which is exactly what I need. Just 2-drop, 3-drop changelings and artifacts that are flavor appropriate. The last one that I wanted to mention was Patchwork Banner, which was the 3-mana artifact When it enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So getting a 3 mana rock in this cube is pretty huge because there's a lot of expensive cards that you're trying to get into. But also having that kind of typal payoff built into it is just the perfect replacement for the automaton that we've talked about before at 3 mana. It's the perfect replacement for it.
And it's more on theme, right? I mean, ultimately, That's what it boils down to. So, like, it kind of checked those boxes for it, too. It fits those fantastical, whimsical ideas that the Fey Cube embraces. And it gives you an anthem. I'm all about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's kind of progress a little further here into different types of cubes. Again, we're going to go into multiplayer constructs. So if you have a commander cube, or if you have, in my case, a 2-headed giant cube, where I've embraced the idea of chaos in my 2-headed giant cube. And anybody that listens regularly knows that I have this strong appreciation for squirrels, right? Actually, so much so that in my 2-headed giant cube, UberBear's 2-headed giant cube, which we include in the show notes, along with the Fey cube, I've included the idea of a squirrels as a sub-archetype because I think they're so neat and it kind of brings that joy and laughter that I want with that vibe of 2-headed giant. And this set has just pushed squirrels to the level, on top of the fact that I already get gifts and things like that, right? Which are very multiplayer centric. So if you're hosting those type of environments, anything that's 4 players-ish, right? You can do more. But one card that I think is neat for a top end to really tie off that idea for UberBear's 2-headed giant cube is the odd acorn gang, which reminds me of the apple dumpling gang, I guess. But for 3 colorless and black, green, you get a legendary creature, Squirrel Warrior. Menace, Trample, Reach. Squirrels you control have tap. Target squirrel you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until the end of the turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Whenever 1 or more squirrels you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card for a 5/5. This is kind of the lord that I've been looking for with the squirrel section so that people see that. And I want people to, and the whole idea behind squirrels, and if you're asking yourself, why is Anthony running squirrels, is because I run like a polymorph package in this cube as well, too. So when you're doing stuff, making squirrel tokens, you can get additional payoffs by sacking them and go and get, say, an Eldrazi. But if you choose not to do that, and you want to stay into the idea of kindred squirrels, you can see where, like, this is just a monster. What do you think about this card, May?
It's a lot of keywords.
It's so many keywords for squirrels.
So many keywords.
Like it's the apple dumpling squirrel gang, so it's pretty great. But I think
I do like the fact that it is a strong squirrel, I would almost say commander in its own right, but on its own, you still have like a pretty good 5-drop 5/5. So,
for sure.
When it connects, because it applies to itself. Whenever it connects, draw a card with evasion, like that's great. I love it.
Oh, yeah. So it kind of does what I want to do, but I wanted something that pulled players towards the polymorphic type of idea that I'm doing, but at the same time, maybe they don't want to do that at all, or because it is a 480 and we're always going to be a little short anyways on the packs, maybe they can just transition to, well, I'm just leaning into the squirrels now. I'm doing Scurry Oak and these type things, right? Which kind of leads me into the Scurry of Squirrels. For 2 colorless and 1 green, you get a creature, Squirrel Scout, 2/2, Myriad, which, if anybody doesn't know, it works in a multiplayer 2-headed giant because it makes a copy of itself. So each opponent gets a launch of this 2/2 coming at them that will go away at the end of the turn. I really embrace the idea of Myriad in that because when you're you don't really declare attackers, but it's doubling the damage, if you will, right? It's sending a secondary copy of this. And whenever Scurry of Squirrels deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, which is not necessarily what I want because I want a lot more targetable. I want to help out Stu to my right or May to my right. But simultaneously, the idea of Myriad just really draws me in. I like this in a multiplayer environment.
Myriad.
Yeah,
Double Myriad.
Gross, right? Double the Myriad, which I don't know how much that is super relevant because it's each opponent, but I'm willing to give this a test. I'm going to study this card a little bit more, but I wanted to put it in the show notes because anytime I see that, I want to spread the wealth of the idea of the attack. I think it's really cool. And it doesn't have evasion. It's a pretty simplistic card, but it's neat. What do you think about that, May?
I mean, it's double Myriad. Even if it was just a 3-mana double Myriad 2/2, I would have played it. The fact that it adds +1/+1 counters just makes it love it more.
So we're going to transition cubes again. We're doing that a lot just because we want to be multifaceted in what we're presenting to you, the listener, so that you can understand there's a lot of other cubes out there. And as we're getting your brains churning on the idea of what you can do with cube. And I want May's advice on this next card. I actually have two of them that I'm specifically going to ask her to evaluate and see if they make sense. And I think I know the answer to this one, but I kind of want to try it. And this is for the Monopoly. And anybody that's not familiar with the Monopoly, it's one of the CubeCon featured cubes. It's my first foray into desert cubes. It is based on economics and treasures being the driving factor. And you can listen to those episodes if you want to learn more about it, and there'll be more coming here in the future. But there's this new card that came out that I did look at for a moment, and I'm not certain if I want to add it. It's Bloodroot Apothecary for 2 colorless and 1 green. You get a creature, squirrel, druid, toxic 2, and that's basically like the new version or the corrected version of poison. When a Bloodroot Apothecary enters, you and target opponent each create a treasure token. So that's my theme. I'm kind of leaning into that a little bit. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-creature token, i.e. treasures, that player gets 2 poison counters for a 3/3. It's kind of a standalone way of getting an alternate win con, if you will, May. It's kind of punishing the idea of the cube. I'm not certain. What do you think about this card?
Anthony, honey.
I know.
I love you. Take a seat. This is an intervention. You're going too far with this one.
Yeah, I haven't added it.
You're going too far with this one. This is... yes, cool. I draft this. My opponent has literally any tokens they want to sacrifice. Well, I hope you like scooping. Have interaction?
Yeah.
No? I hope you like losing. With how ingrained treasures are in your environment, would not be a good idea to add.
Which I think brings a good point to the table, right? Brings the advice that I kind of already had my whole answer suited up here. When I first saw this card, I thought about it, and it punishes people for playing my cube. Because my central theme is if you want to advance, you need to use treasures. If this card sticks, it's going to kill them for playing your cube. And I've experienced that with the Collector Oof and stuff like that, right? So I think it's a good idea when you're curating to always think about it. I'm not adding this card, by the way, but I did think it was relevant to add to the show notes because the allure was make a treasure token, right? But then you're in turn punishing them for playing your environment and your theme, right? So I can
it's a strong
see
card.
your point.
It's a very strong card.
Yeah, and it's standalone. Poison's not actually in there. I wanted to test the idea of micro synergies because I've kind of done this with things like a little bit of, say, mill, or a little bit of the idea of extort, or a little bit of aristocrat. So I thought to myself, can I do a little bit of poison? And you're right. If this card sticks, it's not going to be fun on the other side of the table. It's going to just turn games inside out. So not adding it. But I thought this was a good, one of those knowing half the battle conversations. Would you agree with that, May?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think. Let's switch over to the artifact cube. One of the things that I've always struggled with in the artifact cube, and we've talked about this before, and I think I'm going to get a similar answer, is I don't have a lot of red top ends. It's a lot of mid-range type play. The dynamics are based on mid-range. And this new card has come out called Pyreswipe Hawk for 3 colorless and red. You get a creature elemental bird, so it's not an artifact, doesn't die to your disenchants, which is the theme of the cube, right? Flying haste. When Pyreswipe Hawk attacks, it gets +X/+0 until the end of the turn, where X is the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. When you expend 6, gain control of up to 1 target artifact for as long as you control Pyreswipe Hawk. You expend 6 as you spend your 6 total mana to cast a spell during your turn. So it's it's weird. So instead of paying 5, you pay 6 for a 4/4 flyer with haste. That kind of goes into the artifact theme. It does very much and creates a theft effect. What do you think about this for a late game threat?
It's game-endingly powerful. 5 mana, you get a flying haste creature with 4/4. At a floor, you have an evasive hasty 4/4 for 5. That is good rate. Then it gains additional power if you have any other artifact. So, for context, if say have some 2 mana artifacts still on the board, let's say a mana rock or something, right? Or in the case of like red aggro, some aggressive 2-drop that's also just, let's say, an artifact, right? You are paying 5 to deal 6 that turn. That is enough to close a game in a lot of cases when it comes to red aggro. If they got up to that top end, which you have to ask yourself, is your environment slow enough that your aggro package wants to be playing a 5-mana top end? Is this something that your mid-range deck is trying to use as a finisher? Is this... The role that this is serving is as a game-closing card. And you need to ask yourself what kind of artifacts would go with this that might be too strong to be its own... That it might end up being its own thing. Like, imagine if you had, like, affinity packages in here to, like, an absurd extent. Like, I'm not saying that you don't have affinity. I'm just saying, like, the absurd extent of affinity, right? And then you had this to the top end where it's just like, well, I now have this 7-drop artifact, and now this 4/4 that I just played for 5 is now suddenly a 11/4, right? That's flying haste coming at you.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to put it on the back burner. I put these both on here for the conversation.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with the artifact
potential.
cube, often, it has potential. I may test it within our inner circle, but I think the answer is already the writing on the wall. You kind of said it when you were talking about mid-range. It's not going to be a real aggro because real aggro doesn't really exist in my cube. My cube's kind of designed around the idea of like the Jenny Johnny idea of complexity of the machine build, right? And I've always struggled with this idea of having a top-end finisher that closes games that doesn't have this like oriented, grounded complexity.
It would do that job.
It would do that job, but it also
you need to ask if that job is the appropriate power level within the cube.
I would agree. I agree with everything you said. These last two, we're talking about Bloodroot Apothecary, and then we're going to talk about Pyre Swipe Hawk. I think they're both...
It's nowhere near as egregious as the squirrel.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I mean, but this one demands answers, demands removal.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of really stretches what I'm doing with the cube a little bit further. I want people to have complexity. I don't want them just to, like you said, have a 5-drop mana rock and then just win the game because they're hitting with a 9/4. That doesn't really, that takes away from the complexity of what I'm offering. I want that it's not a machine, it's kind of standalone-ish. And then on top of that, if you expend it, it steals something from them, guaranteeing that I'm going to take something large to really finish the game the next turn. So I'm on the fence with this card.
Let's say the question is, if you play a 1-drop and then you play Pyre Swipe Hop, does it trigger expend 6?
Correct. That's kind of what I'm looking at. Yeah.
Essentially, it's the progression with this card with some aggressively picking a bunch of 1-drop cards. And it's like, all right, I now have 6 mana. For whatever reason, I now have 6 mana. I'm not going to play 1-drop, Firehawk, steal your blocker, and then swing at you for a ton of damage.
And not a lot of effort, actually. You're just playing Magic. So
exactly.
I want to sum that one up. It really just takes away from the machine the overarching theme of my cube. Yes, aggro does exist, but I want to make it so that you had to work for the aggro. This card didn't require a lot from you other than just casting this card and closing out the game.
You're going to have to take your curator lens from the absolute top, looking down at your cube, and seeing how it interacts with the other cards in your environment. What things can answer it? What things does it answer? What job is it supposed to fill? And whatnot. And this is just kind of general advice for anybody looking at cards like these and trying to consider them for your cube.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent tie-off, actually, to the episode. When we're doing these evaluations, we're trying to decide, we're not looking at power max, right? We're not looking at the greatest power tier. We're looking to see, is it right for my environment? Is it healthy? And I think what we exemplified with the last two is that they're, for different reasons, aren't necessarily healthy for the environment. And that's why I put them in the show notes, because it's easy to put that rose-tinted lens on and look at these cards and go, I have a need. Because May and I have talked about that with the Fae Cube, where a card comes out and she needs to add this card to her environment to fulfill a need, but then she has to ask herself, is it right for the environment? Is it too much? Is it a must-answer card, game-ending? I feel like, to answer my own question with a question, yes, it is. These are both, they actually harm my environment. Other than that, I'm just going to go and kind of move over to final thoughts.
It almost makes me want to just make a cube specifically dedicated for it.
I would agree with that too. I would say having all these different types of cube, asking myself, is it FEM? Is it metal? Is it Power Max? Is it artifact derivative? All these ideas, right? Creates its own challenge.
There are a lot of cards.
There's a lot of cards, but then I have to decide, is it aesthetically make sense? Is it overpowered? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be healthy for the environment? These are questions that I'm asking myself while we're doing this episode. And I wanted to put my own challenges out there and have made I already kind of knew a couple of these cards were going to go in the tank and they would be challenged. But that was the idea behind what we're doing here. It's not so much a set review, more of I'm looking at through the curator. May's looking at it across the other side as a curator, but she's also playing the cube. And I think that's the takeaway, right?
Yep.
Wonderful set, reminiscent of, I guess, The Secret of Nim for me. The Wind in the Willows. I have nothing but positive things to say about this set. I mean, kudos to Wizards for really world building this time and really putting the time and effort into it. And I love everything about it. And I think all types of cube curators have something that they can pull out. They may not be able to pull the whole set unless they build a whole cube, but there's a lot to offer.
There are a lot of cards that are going to have a lot of homes, and just the aesthetics, beautiful. Love.
Yeah, chef's kiss. All right, so we're going to kind of move over to our social / events that are happening. We've kind of said this over and over again, but 2024 is the year of the cube. And I don't think we're joking when we said that. People just started doing this all over the country. Events are sprouting up. And two of them that are happening very soon, the month of August. The first one has very limited amount of tickets available, if any, by the time we let this episode out. So if you haven't got your tickets for the Capital Cube Championship 2024, where I will be there, May, I don't know if I told you this, I've already bought my tickets, taking my family to the Smithsonian that Saturday. I'm going to be rocking some cube. I'm excited about it. I believe Anthony and Andy are going to be there and a lot of people. So if you want to come out, just enjoy some lighthearted cube for a great cause. All proceeds are going to So Others Might Eat. So kudos to our good friend Lincoln for putting this together. I am so proud of you. This is amazing. He's one of the people that came and just totally... He decimated the opponents at the UberCubeathon and then said that was really great. Had a great time. He was the number 2 finisher in that event and decided to start his own event. So I'm just so pleased that this continues to happen. And the next one we have, Cube for a Cause by our good friend Scott, Saturday, the August 24th, 2024 from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is a 2-day event. Cube for a Cause is a twice-a-year 64-player charity event hosted in Brooklyn, New York. We will have links for that too. Tickets are on sale. Both of these 2 different events are selling out rapidly. So if you haven't got your tickets for Capital Cube Championship or Cube for a Cause 2024, you need to get them now because we are closing in on those dates. And then other than that, I want to go ahead and thank our Patreons. Thank you, Patreons, for supporting the show. We love you all. Thank you, everybody that's supporting the show. If you want to be a Patreon, I will have a link for that in the show notes. We'll do shout-outs, interactions, etc. Having a wonderful time. We are so appreciative for everybody supporting what we're trying to do here at our little podcast, UberCube. Also, you can join the MTG Facebook drafting page, which I'll include in the show notes. Whereas Stu, who will be on our next episode, has joked laughingly, I am an admin. It is a safe space. You want to build your first cube. You want to have conversations about pack one, pick ones, listen to podcasts, etc. It's a good forum if you're still into the Facebook type stuff. If you love the show, we would truly appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite player. It goes a long way to actually push the show, get us out there to the world. The show is growing. We love everything, all of our audience. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate it. We are currently, today's date, over 40,000 downloads, and we are in 89 countries. So that couldn't happen if it wasn't for the listeners supporting our little podcast. And if you want to support the show, please use our Inked Gaming affiliate link, where you can get your dice bags, your mouse pads, you can get your custom and large volume products. So you want to get a playmat made, this is where you go. This is where I go. The quality's great. We're holding up with our UberCube playmats as we speak. They're doing amazing. You can also find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. You can reach us on Gmail at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. You can also link us on the Discord, which I'll have a invite on the show notes, also added to all of my cubes on Cube Cobra. And again, thank you for our Patreons. You can find us at patreon.com/UberCube. And other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is
Happy cubing.
cubing.
Furries.